Friday. Jon Allen is a senior fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs. He was also Canada's ambassador at one point to Israel. Jon, thanks for taking the time. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Your thoughts on this news that we're now expecting the first shipments anywhere, first truckloads to start entering Gaza tomorrow?
Well, it's terrific news. It's much needed. Of course, it would have been great if it happened earlier, but it's hopefully going to happen. And hopefully, the amount will continue over the weekend and as long as it's needed. I know that countries are ready to be sending and shipping, and it's apparently there is a bit of a problem in terms of getting the goods through Gaza now because a number of the roads have been bombed, but I'm sure that there'll be some reconstruction going on to make that happen.
Why do you think it's taken this long, Jon?
Well, I think I think Israel was concerned about at one point about dual use material going in, fuel that was going to be used by Hamas, but that doesn't explain why medicines and food and other humanitarian goods that are needed should be going in. And I guess we can thank Joe Biden on his most recent visit to Israel, for breaking the logjam.
What do you make of the growing anger in Arab countries and street protests, leaders of Arab countries condemning what Israel is doing? Jon, where does this go?
Well, it's inevitable, and there's no easy answers to this. I mean, if you go back to last Saturday, if you want to go back, farther and talk about root causes, that's one thing. But if you want to go back to last Saturday, Israel experienced, as you know, the worst violence, and more Jews were killed than since the Holocaust. And Israel feels compelled to respond. And they're responding by going after Hamas militarily and politically. But Hamas is hiding amidst a very small urban environment surrounded by innocent civilians, children, women. And they know that. And so Israel's choice is either to do nothing or to go in and try and get them. And unfortunately, um, innocent children and Palestinians who may or may not support Hamas, many don't, are going to be affected. But if Hamas didn't think this was going to happen, they were pretty naive. Indeed, they did know it was going to happen. So Israel is in a rock and a hard place, but the consequences for Palestinians are terrible.
We know that the Israeli defense minister today, Jon, was meeting with some troops along the border. We know there's been a big buildup militarily by Israel in the last 7, 8, 9 days or so. And he basically said, soon you're going to see Gaza from the inside, which would certainly indicate that there will be some sort of ground operation. What do you think we might see?
Well, talk about rock and a hard place. We now think there are over 200 hostages there. And those soldiers, those young soldiers, are going to be encountering booby traps, IEDs, snipers, etc. And yet, notwithstanding, the government of Israel feels that they do have to go in. So it will be Palestinian civilians who are going to suffer, but there'll be plenty of young Israelis who are going to suffer too. And I guess he was there to try and give them some encouragement and beef them up. But it's going to be no easy time, unfortunately.
I want to ask you as well. I mean, you were the ambassador to Israel from 2006 to 2010. The situation here in Canada, Jon, we're seeing protests on both sides in big cities across the country, from Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, you name it, right across to the West Coast. A lot of anger on both sides, a lot of frustration. In the case of, those who are, on the Palestinian side of things, so to speak, that they're angry with the Canadian government's perspective. You have Jewish groups and others that are angry that, people are going after Israel. How do you cut through all of that?
Well, it's very difficult. It's very polarizing. I think, to be fair to the Canadian government, they have tried to express their support for Israel in terms of its right to defend itself. And they've also made it very, very clear that Israel has to be careful in what it does, knowing in the back of their minds that being careful in this situation is not easy. They've also been advocating for that humanitarian corridor. They provided $10 million. There will be more to come. The government and all Canadians are in a really difficult position. There's no question about it. And there's been a built-up frustration amongst Palestinians, but Canadian Jews who support Israel and who see this as an existential threat if nothing is done also feel frustrated. My hope is that this doesn't lead to massive anti-Semitism or the opposite, or you don't get an anti-Muslim backlash either. I mean, we as Canadians have to try and understand this is a long-standing problem. This is the sixth time it's happened. And as soon as the dust settles, as I keep trying to say, we, Canada and others, have to sit down with the parties and begin to look forward, because we don't want a seventh.
John, one last question for you. If you go back about 2 weeks, which in some cases seems like a lifetime ago now, there's obviously the human cost of what we've seen over the last 13 days, but there's also a major diplomatic cost. Israel was on the verge of what could have been an historic agreement with Saudi Arabia after deals with many Arab countries as well in recent years. Is that all gone now?
Well, it's certainly gone in the short to medium term. The Arab Street, whether it's in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Jordan, is furious at this, and they see one side, and I get where they're coming from. And to be honest with you, I think that deal, which it seems to me was unlikely to provide a real benefit to the Palestinians, even though it was supposed to be part of the deal, as was the Abraham Accords. That deal was, many people think, part of the reason that the attacks took place. Probably other reasons as well. You never know what's in the minds of a terrorist group, but that could have been one of the reasons. So that's going to be off the table for a while, maybe not forever. But I do hope when it comes back on the table, the Americans make sure that the Palestinians do get something out of it, like a settlement freeze and the removal of illegal settlements, to send a real message to the Palestinians that if they get their act together, then Israel can sit down and talk to them.
Jon Allen joining us from Toronto, Senior Fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs. He served as Canada's ambassador to Israel from 2006 to 2010. Mr. Allen, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Much appreciated today.